Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this amazing event. I hope everyone's doing well. Paymon, how's it going?
Hello, Krishna. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Hello.
So I think the way that we're going to kick it off today is we're going to do some introductions, self-introductions. All of us are here to talk about the startup ecosystem. As a lot of you may know, it's changing rapidly, and keeping up with what's happening is vital for founders trying to fundraise, trying to build their companies in this new era. So we have an amazing panel of professionals, experts in the matter, all contributing to the startup ecosystem in a different way. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to do introductions. I'll be the moderator, but also a panelist. And we're going to kick it off with, starting off with my main man, Paymon from BeachScore.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Christian, Ali, and Gregory for being here. I'm grateful to share this space with you guys. So quick intro on me. I'm an early stage investor, advisor. I work with a lot of startups. I'm also one of the initial investors in BeachScore. I've been around the company since the start at the concept stage of the company, and we work exclusively in supporting the startup ecosystem. So this is a space we're very passionate about. And what we do at BeachScore, we have a multi-layered company in terms of how we support the startup ecosystem. We have a platform designed for startups in order for them to be able to gain insights about their company, as well as be able to connect with investors, corporations, and government innovation teams. As well, we have a data-driven accelerator program that's built on top of our platform, and we support founders throughout the globe. We're industry agnostic, and we support pre-seed to Series A startups. And the third layer coming on our company is going to be our new fund that we're putting together. So that's going to be very exciting. That's happening as well. So, we're really looking forward to this discussion, and it should be great. Thank you, guys.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that intro. Yeah, we're going to now go into it with Ali Payani. Tell us a little bit sort of who you are, how you're currently contributing to the startup ecosystem, because I think all of these intros are just going to be interesting for people to see like where we're coming from.
Sure. Well, hello everyone. I'm glad I'm here. Thanks for having me. Well, I'm Ali Payani. I'm a chairman, founder, and CEO of Payani Group, and I'm also an advisor at BeachScore. I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I had a lot of startups in system security, AI, robotics, and down to having a marketing agency a few years ago. And now with Payani Group, we actually built a growth ecosystem for the startups and businesses. So we have different layers to as working with the startups or the mid-sized to enterprise businesses. And it covers in 3 divisions. So we help the startups now with fundraising and investment with private equity. And also with advisory, we help in marketing, sales, and digital transformation. And then in Payani Media, we help the startups with execution on marketing and sales. And so we work with tons of B2C, B2B, mid-sized companies and startups, and help them basically navigate, the whole strategy for their companies, from product market fit to all the executions, and then those who obviously are fit into our investment portfolio can raise funds.
Love it. I love that. So that's very oriented towards growth. And I think that's very powerful coming from that perspective. Yeah, Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about you? This is Greg Shepard, for all of you who don't know him. A little intro and where you're coming from.
I've done 12 startups, 12 exits, 4 private equity awards for transactions between 250 million and $1 billion, and then sold a couple companies to eBay. And then I studied why, when, and how founders fail. I did the largest project that I'm aware of on that. And then I wrote a book about that. And then I started Startup Science, which is a platform that powers accelerators, incubators, visa programs, economic development programs. And we power a lot of universities, Harvard, Stanford, MIT, and so on, all over the world. And I'm happy to be here and try to provide some of the data that I found for your founders. So thank you for the opportunity.
Love it. Awesome background. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Christian Peverelli. I'm the founder and CEO of We Are No Code. And I've been building startups for probably about 15 years. I've had some sales, I've had some failures, so I have some scars and also some clinks of champagne. I realized there was a really big problem at the early stage of building startups for founders. And in parallel was discovering no code and now going a lot deeper into AI as well, realizing that these tools could allow you to build startups from scratch, without having technical skills. And in a world where 99.7% of the world doesn't know how to code, that's important. So I focus We Are No Code on basically teaching people how to learn the hard skills to build their startups at the early phase. But I think that these different perspectives that we're seeing now all come down to the fact that it is a complicated ecosystem. So I think that the first thing I'd like to do is kind of go around the room and maybe for each one of us to talk for maybe a minute about kind of the biggest changes that we've seen happen in the startup ecosystem and how you think that kind of affects how founders should be building their companies today. Maybe we can kick it off with Payman, and I want to keep this relatively conversational, more like a podcast than like kind of like a panel. So I think we'll see where the conversations bring us. We have limited amount of time, but I think we can start with kind of an intro of how we see the ecosystem changes and the implications for founders. So how about you give it a first stab, Payman?
Sure. I mean, in terms of the ecosystem itself, I mean, this is a space that's actually one of the things that makes me really excited to work in because it's ever changing. You know, I don't think I've ever seen this ecosystem remain the same. Things are constantly evolving. The type of startups that we're seeing keep changing. A few years ago, it was all about blockchain and crypto, and now it's all about AI. A lot of generative AI companies from the startup side. On the investment side, you know, it's tied to the company and the risk profiles, you know, in terms of what's, the amount of funding that's available out there. Economy itself is getting harder right now in terms of the lack of funding that's available. So that's definitely adds some challenges for the founders. But overall, it's still extremely thriving. I mean, we are seeing a lot of startups coming through. We're seeing a lot of activity all over the world. I mean, that's one of the things with our program. We're international stage. Our stages are between seed and Series A, pre-seed and Series A, excuse me. And we're seeing all kinds of companies from all over the world. So, and regions that I didn't think that were very active. In fact, this morning I was on a call with a founder from Colombia and came to find out there's a lot of activity going on there as well. So overall, I see the ecosystem quite healthy. There's a lot of activity going on. However, you do need to be a lot more intentional in terms of as a founder, in terms of how you approach your investors, the type of investors you're going to, and how you're messaging with them in order to be able to gain their interest and their insights. Besides that, if I were to compare the ecosystem today versus a few years ago, I think there's just a lot more opportunities these days. It's just a matter of what space you're in and how the type of investors that you're working with. But overall, I'm actually quite excited to see how 2024 is going to be.
Love it. Very cool. And you, Ali, like I'm guessing that you see companies that are slightly post product market fit. What are you seeing in that environment?
Well, I agree with him, and I think it's very dynamic now, and I would say like it's very challenging right now. And for the businesses with now the AI and generative AI that you can launch a company in maybe a day, right? It make it very challenging, So I see obviously the investment for this year was way lower, somewhere around 40% less than last year across all the stages. But it's make it really more, again, like I believe it's very challenging now, and for the founders, they have to be really careful now with the way that they spend money, their costs, market validations, their product. I believe they should more focus on their brand positioning and innovation. And so that would make things easier for them. And this is like what I see across the board for all the startups that apply, to us for getting advices on the strategy or executions. But it's kind of a challenging, but it's very, again, on the other hand, it's very interesting, to see a very diverse portfolios across all the board, solving real problems. And I would say like maybe there are some rush or some hurry, that they are because of again, some tools and new technologies like generative AI and etc. that we all know. But overall, I would say it's challenging and very interesting. That you see that's I believe that's exactly what we are expect from the startup ecosystem. So all these challenges comes in now this year. So how are you going to fix it? How are you going to face these challenges this year, and then next year will probably would be different.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy how quickly things are changing. That's for sure. The navigation of it is complex for founders. I agree with that. Greg, what's your take on this?
Oh, well, I'm going to go ahead and be controversial. I disagree with both of you guys. I think that the founder space has always been difficult, and it's always been hard to find money, even when the money was flowing, right? And the people that survived were the people that had good businesses. Mm-hmm. And there's still a ton of money out there. Investors like me and all the guys that are in my fund, they're all just waiting for the right deal. And that's one piece. So they have reasons to hold back now, versus before we didn't have reasons, right? We were just sitting here looking at deals and kind of turning down deals. But now it's like, now our reason is, oh, well, the market's tough. You know how it is, right? But the money's still there, right? Because if the money's not invested, that means it's still floating around. That's one thing. The other thing I think is that there are certain areas where the competition is really difficult. And in those areas, maybe what you guys were referencing, like AI, whenever somebody's talking about something big, I go away the opposite direction, because I look for things that are inch wide and mile deep. And that's because if the wider it gets, the more shallow it gets, because all the competition jumps in there. And if you look at the downturns in the market over the last like 20, 30 years, I've been doing this 35 years. So if you go back and you look at 2008 and you go back to the dot bomb, and then you look at big data, which turned out, and IoT, you guys remember all these trends, right? And they were just big fluffy trends that got the founders fired up and everybody going, and the investors got boiled up at how much actually happened. I mean, that all that stuff comes around. And I think that investors are looking for something that isn't just hype and float, right? But something that is like real and has meat, which to me should have been that way the entire time. Like you shouldn't be able to come up with some random idea without any revenue or nothing, right? Just some vapor that you're thinking, yeah, this is going to be big, without supportive data to support that, right? To come out and say, this is why I think it's going to be big, and convince people. So I think when I look around, I just spent the last 3 weeks traveling around through Canada and through a lot of other countries, talking to universities and accelerators and entrepreneurship programs, all kinds of different SAP startup systems programs around the country and around the world. And what I see is a massive shift. And the shift is starting with the universities have a 33% decline in people going after advanced degrees, and a 28% increase in those same people going into entrepreneurship programs. Mm-hmm. That right there tells you something, right? That is a huge, huge thing. You can go up, it's University World News Report. You can go find it yourself and look at it. There's a whole bunch of them out there. So that says something really big. Then the other piece is that you see, things like China, who's basically imploding right now after this massive expansion that they had, which they grew way bigger than they should have. And then you see the money in other markets starting to move over to the Western countries, right? So I see that happening. And then in addition to that, I see a lot of people starting to put together different ways to help founders. And then the biggest thing I noticed is that I was at a conference in Montreal where there was 170 of the wealthiest families in the world. And we were all in this conference working exclusively on ESG. Now, that is the biggest, everybody's talking about AI. And I'm like, AI is a tool. It's an application, not an industry. It's just something you use, just like big data and IoT and everything else, right? So it's a blanket statement. And I feel like everybody's talking about AI. And yeah, it's going to be helpful. It's going to be great. But if you've used it to do anything, it's got a long way to go before it's going to be like really useful. We're using it ourselves, and I play with it all the time. But I think that it's a better conversation to say, how can you use AI, in what vertical, in what space, and then you have something to help founders. And I think that some of the best applications have to do with environmental sustainability. Environmental meaning cleaning up what we've done. Sustainability meaning build stuff that we can keep doing that doesn't cause the damages we've done in the past. And then in addition to that, inclusion, like taking people that were otherwise marginalized and utilizing those same people, deaf people, blind people, neurodivergent people, people that are immigrants that don't speak the language proper, whatever, right? Like all those people are aware of their problems more than anybody else from the outside. And when I look at founders, I see two types of founders, right? You have the visionary who looks from 80,000 feet and they see everything from the top down, and it's just a tapestry of opportunity. And then you have the subject matter experts who look from the inside out, and they're looking inside of the problems. The subject matter experts seem to come out with the really juicy deals. You have the guys like behind me, Steve Jobs and Einstein, more visionary type people, right? And then you have the people that work inside, like a Zuckerberg, who's actually inside the university working on it themselves. I think that looking at things that way, combined with the idea that, you have a bull market and you have a bear market, and companies and people buy businesses for either to make or save money. Customers buy products to either make or save money in some way, right? So if you're in a bull market, then you're saving money. So if you're trying to sell something that's making money, you're not going with the universal flow of saving. You're like, hey, make money. And the guy's sitting there going, man, I'm trying to cut expenses, not buy new stuff. So I think you have to align yourself with what's going on in the market. The market is a bear market, so save money. A bull market is make money and shift your model. Even if your model is still to make money, you can change your messaging and change the way you're maneuvering your business inside of the ecosystem so that you're focused on making money versus saving money, depending on what market conditions are there. So I think the combination of looking at what is the most exciting thing in the world, which is ESG. Why? Because we're all stuck on this thing together, right? We all live here together on this earth, and it goes away, we all go away, right? It's our backyard. So everybody is concerned about this right now. So how could you get a better market than that? On top of the government incentives, NATO and everybody starting to just really crunch down and put money into the market. That's exciting. So how does AI come in? Figure out how to use AI to help out with those issues. And then associate that with the bear market conditions. In other words, position your messaging so you're saving money instead of making money. And then think about a subject matter expert's approach to something in the sustainability space. So one of the things that we did is we toured through all these universities. Right? We're talking all these universities, and these professors have these papers that are amazing that have never been seen the light of day that are solving major issues. I went and talked to a bunch of corporates, and they're like, well, we have all these problems we need to solve for, and we're hunting for these solutions. So if I was a founder, I'd be having conversations with those families. I'd be having conversations with the corporates, and I would be asking questions specifically circled around, what is the market condition right now? Saving money. Okay, got that. What is the biggest, most massive problem that's out there? ESG. And then put those two together and start having conversations to figure out how you can either change your business or direct your messaging of your business in that direction. That's what I think. I think that I was just, at these conferences, there's a huge, those guys said they were talking about $1 trillion between them in ESG, $1 trillion, right? There's no fund that big, right? There's money. It's just not focused at you. So how do you get yourself in the path of the money? Well, you got to put yourself in that path, which I think is ESG personally, including inclusion. Sorry, I went on there for a while.
No, I love that. I love that. That went macro and micro and everywhere in between, talking about the world, the state of the world. And yeah, that's super interesting. So if I take my little take on this is actually that there's as you say, a lot of different moving pieces. I agree that AI is super exciting. The biggest problem with AI is that with the flip of a button, and we can, I think today we can already give a minute of silence for GPT. Basically, GPT is basically making extinct about 300, funded startups in the AI market. So I think that there's like this whole thing happening where it's like, we're focused on like AI. It's the buzzword, as you say, we have them all the time. I think the difference between this one and some of the other buzzwords that we've heard before is that it has it's going to change every industry, everything. It's going to have an sort of like a play within each one of those industries and for every level of founders, from enterprise to the one guy who's just trying to launch his business. Another big trend I'm seeing is basically, we always talk about like, equity, let's bring more people in, let's allow more people to like do this thing of entrepreneurship. The truth is it's being limited to a very small number of funders funding a very small number of founders who come from a very small number of universities. And so for me, what's very exciting about the movement in terms of like, no code, AI, actionable entrepreneurship, is really this idea that like, actually, now we're talking about actually anyone who has some basic things, right? So still, we're probably 50% of the world doesn't have access to, an internet connection and a computer, right? At least way more, probably more like 80. But I think that right now we're multiplying the number of people who have access to be able to start businesses in general. The other thing I'm seeing is that there's this like mashup. We've always thought of startups as startups, right? But for me, startups and businesses are really just small, medium businesses and startups are all meshing together because guess what? Before the idea was like, hey, I have an idea. I go and this was me 15 years ago. Get this great idea. I'm so smart. Great. Put together a pitch deck, go to investors, pitch to 100 investors, and they write a check for you. Oh, great. Now let's go and build this product and figure out this stuff, right? You needed the money to go because the infrastructure to build at the time I was building a live streaming infrastructure, like it required a lot of money, right? Now it's like, you need to have revenue, like 90% of deals are going towards revenue generating startups. First of all, so it's like it leaves everyone at the point where they have to like figure out what to do until they have their first dollars in revenue, meaning the search phase, the monetization phase, and the beginning of the growth phase has to all be under the founder, right? So to a certain extent, it's kind of leaving way more options for founders, meaning that someone who's super smart and basically gets to revenue, like now they actually have leverage and choices. Like VC money, that's great, but like that's also very expensive. And guess what? A lot of people who raise VC never make money, even at the sale. And I think these things are like, we're getting to the point where there's like, as you said, this huge influx of potential people building businesses. I think almost every business is kind of a startup business, as they used to say. We've been saying this for a long time, but now it's becoming increasingly true. And a lot of these products can be scalable just because they're distributed online. And so I think that it's actually a really weird time where like navigating the innovations that are happening in AI space is important to understand. But also if you get lost in that, now you're going to be spending all of your time just trying to figure out what to, like how you can adapt to AI and just playing around a bunch of tools. So I see a lot more people getting into entrepreneurship. I see there being more options for founders. I see that actually there's going to be way more competition for high demand deals, especially for like these kind of moonshot deals, because guess what? Those people have options too. And there's, like you mentioned, there's a lot of money that's outside of the traditional startup founder ecosystem. So it's going to be very interesting to see how all these worlds mesh. And as you said, like a lot of people are just moving away from like higher level degrees because they're just like, I want to build a business. So like, it's almost like entrepreneurship used to be this thing of like the radical. And now we're talking about this becoming a mainstream career for most people. So it's so interesting to see all these things shape. And I don't want to take too much more time in terms of my vision. I definitely believe that like learning like hard skills these days is really, really important, and like how you can actually take action. Because one of the other things is just like mindset. So like humans right now, the biggest problem is that they're actually, they are not really it's scary to shift mindsets from like, I work in a company and I'm like in a stable company, to like, I have to do things that are imperfect. I have to figure it out. I have to find out how I can pay myself each month, if it's even possible. It's like a really big mindset shift that's taking place. But I think that I'm so excited to see what happens next, because I think that this is much needed. And I think that everyone will benefit, and that everyone should just focus on like, where are you actually, like really look at yourself in the mirror, see where you're adding value. This leads to the next point we're going to be talking about now, which is like the like entire ecosystem of like accelerators and incubators, and what is their role? Like, what really is their role? And knowing that they can't do everything. So I think, you know, we all are here and we have ways to support founders, right? So now I'd love to hear a little bit about like, what role do you do you think that you know, with what you're working on, like what stage and how are you helping? You know, and of course, I think from your backgrounds, I can already kind of backward engineer it, but I'd love to hear a little bit what people think about like that whole support system around founders, because it's complex, you know. So let's go against the grain now. We'll start with Ali.
Well, wanted to first 100% agree with Greg, and that was also was trying to make that point that startups should save more money and talk to their customers. So I think, well, in marketing perspective, the brand positioning is something we see is really off for them, a lot of startups, and I think the reason is again the AI, because they are kind of have like this FOMO to build their startups. And I see like the data says like 2 out of 5 Americans now are entrepreneurs. Well, that's still something, because now you can build that company in a few days. But kind of like out of, I would say, 100 startups requests we got, let's say in the last 1 month, I would say 60% are pre-ref. And when you look at their pitch deck, I mean, like the website, simple as the website is, they didn't even spend time on it. And then when you're talking to some of them, say like, do you have any research with your customers or any segments? Well, they show us the sum table, which again, so that's kind of like, no, you need to talk to your customers. You need to know your segments. What are the exact problems? Have you talked to them? Did you provide your features, your whatever you think going to solve these problems? And did you got feedbacks? I would say like 90% of the time, the answer is no. And we help them to build that minimum viable segment, you know, to research the segments, you know, and I think that would really help. I had the same experience at UCLA a few months ago. Was it basically a judge in a leadership startup class, and it was a really amazing groups. The entrepreneurs, they were really passionate, good ideas. And they mainly used AI to analyze the data in the market rather than going and get those themselves and analyze their solutions. So I think I would say like that for now, I see the brand positioning, which has like their marketing, the website, you know, the designs and creatives and all that, to the product market fit is the biggest, I would say, what entrepreneurs I think would need to focus. And obviously, ESG is really hot now, but this is like what we see most of the time, you know, that they have these two problems.
Love that. Greg, what's your take on this? And then we'll go with Payman.
I think to more focus on your question is, what are the challenges that the founders are having now? Like what?
And how to support them, yeah.
And how to support them. I think that, well, I'll tell you this. The study I did that, you know, it's funny is I started in 2016, but to the earlier point, it does change constantly. And I thought it was going to be done in 5 years, but it looks like it's never going to be done. So because it's just constantly changing, you know, it's like, I think I understand, okay, here's the data sets, but then it changes all the time. I think that the 57.1% of founders, you know, go under in the first 18 months. And the rest of the founders go out of business up to the 90% over the following years. But what's interesting is that that is right about the time that they get done with an accelerator or a startup assistance program. So, but then on the other side of the data, you see that those that do make it say that, about 45% of them say that they were, that they feel like they were way better off by working through a startup assistance program than if they hadn't done that. So then what I did is I started to, I'm getting to the answer, just sorry.
No, it's good. I like this.
So I started to dig into the data. I did 2,800 interviews with the founders that failed and those that were successful. I did 2,667 interviews with accelerators. I mean, this is there was 210,000 articles and case studies that we went through. It was an immense amount. It was a team of 5 people. And what we found over and over and over again is that the majority of founders are failing for the same reasons over and over and over. And the number one reason, and you're not going to be surprised by this, although you might be surprised by the data underneath, is bad decisions. So then, I use the TPS, the Toyota Production System, and ask the question, why are you making bad decisions? And the number one thing came back, bar none, bad advice. I said, well, how did you make that decision? Well, so-and-so gave me advice. Do you know who the number one offender of the bad advice was? Investors. Number 2, mentors. And number 3, program managers. So, and I know this is going to piss off people, but I got to tell you, that's what actually happened, right? That's real. So then I started asking him, and I was like, well, what questions did you ask them? Because if somebody gave you bad advice, maybe it has to do with the question you asked, or maybe you didn't interview the person you were asking the advice of. So I learned, and what I found out, to sum it up, is that, there's a vertical that you're in. And if you're talking to somebody that was successful in SaaS for some reason, and now you're talking about pharma, probably the wrong person to be talking to for advice. The second thing is that if you're in go-to-market and you're talking to somebody that's an expert in product, maybe you need to talk to somebody that's expert in go-to-market. And the third thing is, if you're in a certain, you have a specialty, like a functional area specialty, like operations or sales and marketing or shared services or service and delivery, whatever your functional area is, and you're giving advice by stepping outside of where your specialty is, that trio is where all the bad advice came from. So it was interesting because it was like sometimes it was one hit wonder, right? Somebody did one startup and they just happened to hit a wave at the right time. And then they're out there telling everybody, this is what I did. Well, that was their use case. That was a specific scenario for them. And maybe they got hit with a wave behind them and carried them all the way in, or whatever. Maybe it was during 21 when everything was hot, and, or 20 right after the pandemic when all that money was built up and started to spill over. But my advice for people, if you're a founder or a support organization, is you need to make sure you're asking the right questions and that you're not giving advice where you're not good at it, because it's real easy when you are put in a situation to have your ego there and be like, yeah, I know, I can answer that question. It's a lot harder to say, listen, that's not my expertise. You need to talk to somebody else, because you have to realize when you give somebody that advice, you could be responsible for, the failure of a company, the investors losing their money, maybe the founder losing their home. I mean, it's real, like some of these stories I heard, they were, it was heartbreaking. I'm like listening, I'm like, oh dude, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, this sounds terrible, and I was like thinking to myself, man, if that person would have just said, listen, this is not my forte, you need to talk to somebody else, it may have resulted in a different outcome.
Oh man, you're like preaching to the choir here. I think all of us were like, yeah,
right.
Yeah, like bobbing our
it's
heads.
So obvious, right?
It's a very big problem. Mentor whiplash is kind of the idea that people get conflicting mentorship from different people. It's very difficult to have that, and especially when you respect the people and what they do. But I think one of the big things I would mention there is simply that, first of all, a lot of specialists who have never built startups from scratch, like who are not in the same phase that you're at, are giving advice out. So you could be an amazing product manager at a big company. It's like, don't give advice to like a first-time founder
Yeah,
building their
the
MVP.
corporates.
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude, the amount of corporates that had given bad advice, like people that were like, the founders fall in love with, VP of Adobe or something like that, right? They've never done a startup and they're just used to hiring people, and maybe they're an entrepreneur. But there's a big friggin' difference, going back to our
Resources.
earlier conversation, right? Between
guys,
an entrepreneur.
if I can jump in here, we got to make sure we taper these statements a little bit, because one thing's with founders, I don't want them to start thinking, wow, I got to be very careful and not get bad advice. What we want to make sure of is that, see, one of the things with founders, especially first-time founders, they don't know what they don't know. Right? So they shouldn't be scared about talking to people, reaching for help, getting advice, getting mentorship. What I always tell founders is, don't just listen to me, or don't just listen to person X or Y, get multiple opinions. You have to reach out, you have to talk to people. Can you get bad advice? Absolutely. But I think it's a lot worse if you're not talking to people because you're worried about getting bad advice, right? There's a lot of people out there with extensive experience in the spaces that people are doing business in, and you need to be able to reach out and talk to them. I mean, I know founders that have been extremely successful, and they've had a dozen advisors working with them on a regular basis. Will all those advisors agree at all times? No. But there's, like I said, there's two sides of this. There is definitely the potential of getting bad advice, but I think it also could be a lot worse if you're not willing to talk to people, not willing to listen, not willing to reach out and get advice in order to help your business.
Yeah, I mean, no advice is worse than bad advice.
Exactly. You want to make sure, because I got to tell you, I know many founders that don't want to take on advisors. They're still floundering. They're still doing the same things.
Oh yeah, that's a huge mistake. I agree with you.
Right? And then going back, Christian, you asked the question of, okay, how do these organizations, the studios, the incubators, the accelerators help? That's one of the ways, right? Like one of the biggest challenges I see throughout our program, and even things that I've done outside of it, is founders really understanding the investor mindset, not really understanding what they're looking for. The other day, I got a pitch deck that was 50 pages long, right? So really helping them and say, you have to look at things from a different viewpoint. You've been inside your technology, you've been inside your company so much, you know it in and out. And when you try to convey that across, it takes you an hour and a half to do it. That's not going to work. What's the better way to message this? So the audience that you're presenting to, you're talking about your company, can really absorb what you say in a matter of minutes, not in a matter of hours. So those are some of the areas that programs like this can really help. Now, there's big differences between studios, incubators, and accelerators, right? Studios come out and say, hey, I got ideas. Who wants to come and build them, right? Incubators say, okay, let us help you build a team. Let us help you start working on your program. And accelerators are, like what we do, we take founders that have already built their company to a certain stage, and we help them with the value that they're looking for. Whether it's, we're going to market. How do we best go to market? How can we start pitching to investors? Or it's we need introductions in the enterprise world, depending on the spectrum they're doing. So accelerators, depending on their makeup of it, they can really customize a program to help founders in different stages. So it's really vital to really seek out those resources, because there's so much of them available. The cream of the crop is YC. People ask me, when you have an accelerator, should I still go to YC? Absolutely. I think everybody should. But what is the chances of getting into a program like that? I don't know, I don't know what the latest statistics are, but hundreds of thousands apply and a few hundreds get in. So there's got to be other resources available. You have to be able to reach out and utilize the expertise that's out there that's willing to help you. And by no means you should not take any one person's feedback as, okay, if this person says I got to turn right, then I have to turn right. There's no other way.
I think I'll add to that they should be, obviously the accelerator program, Teachers Score, many other mentorship programs, are out there, and they're obviously really good for the entrepreneurs. I think they need to more focus on who they're talking to and kind of validate, because we see that a lot too. conference or I'm in a seminar with all of the VP of marketing or marketing directors, but they have no idea really how marketing works, but they are giving speeches.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and sometimes a lot of time we find the mistakes, even in their basic stuff. So I think it's getting easier for the founders to validate the mentor
Absolutely.
and advisors and kind of say like, all right, so is this make sense to go with this person, as my mentor and advisor? What is their background, So if we are talking into, we help a lot of startups with marketing and sales, but we're not getting into their operations. Or we can help with many kind of ways on the products and their strategy on marketing. So they should kind of validate that. And we get a lot of this too, that we're talking to the founders and they say like, yeah, you're right, but we don't have money now. So that's where the the friend and family comes in, that you're absolutely know that your mentors and advisors are right. So you have to figure that out, like how to basically listen to those advices.
Yeah,
I
it's tough.
think that. I think
Go
that
ahead.
I have to. Yeah, I think that you definitely need to get advice in case that was misunderstood, because it sounds like it. You need to get the right advice
Absolutely.
from the person that has the right information. Because when you look at the data, you're looking at. I mean, there's so much, right? And you see these pattern lines that are just so dominant, and you're just like, wow.
Yeah.
And then when you go and break it down and you actually have the conversation, because what I would do is I would call them, and I would say, can you tell me what exactly happened and who you were talking to and stuff? And it's they're taking, sometimes it's the right person at the wrong time, the wrong person at the right time, and
100%.
yeah. And so that's like the one thing that I really have dedicated my life to now, is trying to help founders be more successful, trying to prevent them from making the mistakes. I mean, maybe we can drop the failure rate by even 10%. That's, out of the 750 million startups that we had, or 750,000 in North America and 1.1 million in the Western countries that we had last year, just 10% would be a huge number of people that would have made it. And that would answer the question that we have with the investors, right? The problem with people not wanting to put money in, getting scared after that last rumble that we had, where everybody was overvalued, which is actually the number 3 reason why they fail, largely skewed by the problems that we've had over the last couple of years. But generally speaking, I think, you get the right advice from the right person at the right time, which means you have to understand your business enough to know that you're talking to the right person at the right time, which is its own challenge. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think, no, but what you've talked about makes so much sense. Payman and all of you have just mentioned some incredibly important points, which are that every founder is at a different phase of their business. The support systems have to understand that each founder is at a different phase. And if you give the wrong advice to the wrong founder at the wrong time, then it's a huge problem. When we talk about marketing, if you haven't gotten your first paying customer manually, or like through kind of like first 100 customers approach, stop trying to build a scalable marketing strategy, for example, right? Or it's like, if you haven't figured out the channel that kind of works for your business, it's like, and I think that's really what's tough. But I think it also comes from the fact that we have so many support systems that try to do everything. They're like, I can do everything. You can do every part. I could do it, And I think that's what becomes dangerous is that it starts, and honestly, it's a waste of time for the founders, because like a person who has 20 years experience in product at Google can give incredibly valuable advice to the right person at the right time, right? But you put that person in front of someone who's building a landing page, and it's like, both people's time is not valued, and the advice is probably not going to be on point. And so I feel like that's where this conversation around kind of figuring out like which parts of the process do we help the most in, like what type of founder, right? So maybe Ali will be more focused B2B and more like growth, but then he'll take people mainly when they've just raised a seed round. And, and I think that the more we can become granular about how we help people specifically, and this is just an example, of course, Ali, sorry for using you, but the more then we were able to give proper advice to founders for the right phase that they're in. But yeah, it's tough because like some of it, it's like just about you don't know what you don't know, right? That's what Payman said, right? So like to start, it's like you need to even know what the map looks like to know where to go next, you know? And a lot of people, they just do all the same things. It's like they apply to all the accelerators and then they get in, they get rejected, and then or some of them get in. But it becomes problematic because it's like you get rejected 5 times from like YC, Techstars, 500 startups, and all that, and then you start just thinking like, meh, maybe I just need to give up. Maybe this is not a good idea. And it's just like, no, like they're not open about it. But yeah, 90% of the companies they take have revenue, right? So there's also, I think, a problem in the support systems where it's like people are not telling them like, hey, don't even apply if you don't have revenue. Why? Because they want everyone to apply, right? But then I think that it's a little bit misleading to founders who start taking routes like building pitch decks when they have an idea when we're in 2023 and like no one's going to invest in your pitch deck, for example. So it's complex for sure. So we jump into a kind of rapid fire. I would love, because now like it seems like everyone is like stimulated, everyone has lots of ideas. Give me a little bit of the nectar of like advice that you would like to share right now, and we'll just do it relatively rapid fire, like maybe just a couple of points of advice that you would have for founders. And maybe we'll just do a little tour around the room. So maybe Payman, if you wanted to start off with this this question, because I'm sure we have, all of us are thinking about what we're gonna like. We have things we want to share, and I think they might be very different, so that's okay. But like, let's get some value out, guys, for the people watching.
You're on mute. You're on mute. Sorry, man.
Thank
I
you.
was like sitting there going, "Oh, he's going to say
Thank
some
you. I
juicy stuff."
appreciate it.
He's
Background
really
noise here. Yeah.
thinking deeply.
No, what I was saying that was on top of my mind, especially since I deal with a lot of pre-seed founders, is again how you position your messaging to reach out to potential investors, right? That pitch deck, how it looks. I mean, you got to remember, especially if you're emailing your pitch deck out, people are going to take at most about maybe 2 minutes looking at that. Right, so if you send someone a 30-page pitch deck, it's not going to get the job done. So, and that is so vital, right? If you're at the stage that you're trying to raise money from a venture, either angels or venture capital firms, you really understand how best to create. And there's a lot of resources out there. There's a lot of templates, a lot of discussion around this. But it's so vital. Make sure you really think about, from an investor's point of view, what are they looking to see? And there's like top 10 things that every investor is looking for. And that's what you need to cover. And then you can spend, if they come back and want to do further discussions, then spend 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever it may be, to really dig into all the details. Most investors, by the way, are not going to care how you're making the sausage per se. What they care about is the value you bring into the market and the potential of it, right? How you're doing it, and I see so many decks that there's slide after slide about the technology that's being developed and all the intricacies behind it, and really what we need to see is what's your differentiation, what's the value you bring into the market. So that's one definitely big area. If I were to say one thing, that's one thing that's very consistent in terms of what I see a lot of early stage founders. So there's many more I can mention, but
yeah, and we might do a second round for this one. Greg, do you have a good one?
Yeah, there's a couple things. But to your point, I agree. A lot of founders don't realize there's a pre-pitch.
Yeah.
There's a pre-pitch and then there's a pitch. And before the pre-pitch, there's information. And I agree. I mean, the amount of time you spend looking at a deck, you look at, 100, 200 a month, and it's like flip, 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 like that fast. The other thing I would say is that in terms of actually getting some progress, what I think is that, if you look at the startup life cycle and you go into the phases of the startup life cycle and you focus first on validation, right? So each stage of the process is a validation, vision, product, go to market, standardization, growth. As you go through optimization, growth, exit, you need to make sure that you validate on either side. Right. And what I mean by validate is, I can't remember who it was. Somebody brought up the customer. So what I tell founders is I say, you need to start with 2 advisory boards. One is your industry advisory board, and the second one is your customer advisory board. You go to the industry first and run it by them and say, hey, what do you think of this? Now, who are those people? Those are your acquirers. A lot of people forget that these businesses end in an exit to an acquirer, and that is a process that takes years. So you got to start when you first start. Companies buy companies just like people buy products to either make or save money. The majority of those, that's what a synergy is when people talk about a synergy. And the majority of them are to make money because they've already acquired their customers. So they're CAC to LTV. They've already cost their company the CAC. So now what they're doing is they're like, okay, well, I need to sell more products to my customers that I've already paid for in order to increase the lifetime value, the LTV. So if you start your business without, at the very, very beginning, understanding who's going to buy your business and what their customers look like, you could get all the way down the road and realize that you didn't have what we call attachment rate, which is the attachment between the company and the customers. And you can't fix that quickly because you could have spent 5 years building up customers, go to exit, and they go, nah, it's not a match. It's not going to help us with our objective, right? So it's like building a product without a customer, building a company without an acquirer in mind. It just doesn't make sense because essentially your whole business is a product to your acquirer. They can give a shit about your customers most of the time. They want to make sure that your product is going to be able to sell to their existing customers, especially if they're big. So my advice for people is first figure out who your acquirers are, start talking to them. Don't worry. They want to talk to you. They pay a lot of money to get deal flow. They want to talk to you, talk to them and figure out what their requirements are and build the company to suit them. And you probably want like 5 different acquirers, 3 to 5. And you need to realize that it's like a game of musical chairs, right? You may have 100 startups selling to 5 bigs and somebody's going to be left standing. So you need to figure out who your acquirers are to get ahead of everybody else. Do it right at the beginning. Start talking to them and get them in the flow of things so that they understand that you're there and they're helping you build the product and you're getting the culture fit and all of the things that you need along the way as you're building it, and you're building something to suit somebody to buy, right? Their customers specifically. I can't tell you how many of them I see in the data. It's amazing how many don't do their exit until like a year before they sell. They don't get their funding, they go under. If you go to an investor and you're like, when are you going to get your money back? You're going to get your money back in 5 years. How are you going to get your money back? This company right here, these companies, they've all bought companies like mine for 10x top. And you could see they clearly have a hole in their strategy right here because you can see companies they've acquired on either side of it. I'm going for that. You're way better off getting investment capital if you do that, especially if those same people are giving you email statements saying, yes, I validate that you have a good product. And then you go to your customers. And the customers should be the customers that your acquirer already has. And your attachment rate is the percentage of those you go after that you actually get. And you start by talking to them. And over time, you're like, listen, investor, I talked to 100 of the customers that this acquirer has. 50 of them said, I have a good product. Then when they start buying the product, you're like, hey, I've got 50% attachment on a cohort of 100 customers already on my acquirer. And most of the time when you do that, you can sell the business way faster. I sold the one before the last, or two of them ago. I'm sorry, I get mixed up. I think it was 2 of them ago. I sold it in a year and a half from the date I actually started with the idea because I did that. And they were just like, they wanted to take it off the shelf, right away. So that would be my advice to founders. I took more than my share, so I won't take any more time.
No, I love that. That's a really good piece of advice. Know who your acquirers are and build your company around that. Ali.
So I agree on that with basically build that your minimum viable segment. That's basically if it's your acquirers, customers, or if you're solving a specific problems. And I'm usually bringing a Facebook example. Zuckerberg didn't say like, yeah, they're connecting people around the world and then start advertising and spending tons of money, for download my app. But he only started with the university students, right, in the Harvard. So that was his minimum viable segment. So if I be successful converting these 2,000 people here, I can go to the next university. Then I can get the whole world. So what I see, I mean, obviously we have tons of advices given to the founders in their finance, products, and many others. But I see that in the last, if I analyze the last 100 startups we were analyzing, I would say the product, the not having the minimal viable segment or product market fit, and branding is these two. And I think my advice would be don't basically have that FOMO or rush things because of the world how it is now with AI. Like 2 weeks ago is too already late. But just wait and work on your product, talk to your customers, find the solutions, really work on your branding and positioning. So these are, I think, the most important thing that we see today. With the startups.
Love that. Really good advice as well. I'm going to go on a bit of a slightly different tangent for my piece of advice. I'm going to take it away from fundraising, from exits, and I'm going to say that a lot of entrepreneurs are trying to build companies. Whether those companies are venture backed or not, the goal is to own your own company. Sometimes it's going to be to exit, sometimes it's not. I think people way too quickly in their journey shift into fundraising mode when guess what? What's on your pitch deck is reflected by how far your company is. So it's not like you're going to build a really nicely designed pitch deck that's going to sell your idea. Sure, good design is great, but guess what's more important? Showing a traction slide on your on your pitch deck that shows that you're going up and to the right. And I think that people make a big sacrifice when they go out and they raise money too early, before having proper product market fit, before having some traction, a couple months of proof, because A, they're not credible to the investors. So they spend all this time setting up meetings that don't go anywhere. And it takes away a huge amount of time from building out the operations. And once you have a business that's generating revenue, you have lots of options. And fundraising and exiting is 100% a great option. You can build great businesses like that. But I think that the more you focus on learning the skills to build things, launch things, get first paying customers, I think the more that you're putting yourself in a position of leverage, regardless of which path you choose. And so I kind of am, encouraged by people who build $1 to $5 million a year companies, and then one day they're just like, oh, you know what? And actually, I'm going to raise money now, and I'm going to make this super scalable by minimizing the products I serve, or by kind of working into that model. But I think the risk is that people are all going after raising money, all doing it a bit too early. And guess what? When you fail a startup, it leaves scars. And sometimes those scars stop you from believing in yourself and your ability to execute on startups in general. And that's what I think what on a global level is kind of crushing entrepreneurship a little bit. It's this high failure rate is also making founders who could be incredible founders over time kind of missing the fact that this is a career. Maybe the first, second, third startup, I think everyone in this room knows that you don't always hit it the first time. And guess what? You get better at it. Sure, the industry changes, but I think the more that you learn how to become someone who's able to take advantage of these opportunities, the more you're increasing the chances in a market where 90% fail, right? So yeah, I think that there have been so many amazing sort of things said today, coming from different perspectives. Again, I want to just repeat, be careful who you take advice from, but make sure you do get advice. Maybe the next panel should be how we can train accelerator programs and support systems to mentor founders more versus the other way around. And then maybe we can do a little, round of the room of like what all of us are trying to do in the startup ecosystem, like what our goal is with our current endeavors. So maybe we can speak about the different endeavors we're doing and sort of what our end goal is with that. Hey, man.
Yeah, I can start. Sure. I mean, for us, as I mentioned earlier, we're really trying to become a central figure within the startup ecosystem. We're putting founders first and supporting founders. We don't take equity in their company. We want to be able to really support them based on the value that they're looking for. If they're very early stage and they just finished an MVP, how can we help them to scale their company, get those initial introductions, being able to meet the investors that they need to get the visibility that they need. If they're later stage, we've had Series A companies in our program, and they're focused on getting the introductions they need on the enterprise side or in the government, and being able to support them that way. So, and with our fund coming on, hopefully early next year as well, we're going to be able to do even more for them. So that's what we're focused. How best can we help founders in a multi-layered approach and be able to support them, and pre-seed to Series A, industry agnostic and international. So and it's been amazing.
Awesome. Ali.
Oh, well, my really mission is to help founders not make mistakes. I mean, like I started my business here in the US, going door to door for months. So we know what it takes, to build a business. And so what we do, we really help the startups and businesses to not make those mistakes, especially when it comes to our Pioneer Media division on marketing and sales, whether it's the budget we're spending on their marketing and sales activities and targeting. So again, that becomes our advisory that we help with digital transformation, marketing and sales, creating the go-to-market strategies to product market fit. And we really help a lot of founders, I would say, in the past few months to don't spend now. So they were like rushed to spend on marketing. We say like, no, it's not the time. So you're not ready actually to spend anything on your marketing now. So we help them with advices if they're in that stage. So we evaluate all the startups, what the stage they are in our basically scale, if they're ready to have the marketing, if they're ready to get funded from us, or if they need some help in their strategies and their business to be changed, and then we make them ready. So we design different programs for them if they have 3 months to 6 months based on what the stage they are, to help them basically launch or relaunch their product.
Love that. Very cool. Great mission. Greg.
Well, I've been building an entire platform that has free education for founders in all of the areas that they commonly fail. That platform is given away free to universities to give away free to their founders. So we have, I don't know, tens of thousands of founders in the platform at any one time, hundreds of universities, nonprofits, economic development program. I mean, it's just across the board, all around the world. And the whole idea is to get them in, and it's one thing to say that I want to help with the failure rate. It's another thing to say that I want to help with the failures that are the most common ones. They're going to fail for other reasons, but at least not for the reasons that I studied. And that's because it's been that way for like 30 years. I mean, that's Einstein's definition of insanity. So, my whole thing is like, how do we make sure that they don't fail for the reasons that they're always failing for, and leave it to the startup assistance programs, the accelerators, incubators, and that sort of thing to do it. So that's why we give them the software to enable them to help the founders with the outliers and the edge cases, instead of the common stuff that's always the same over and over again. Standardization being a fundamental problem with the whole startup problem that I was talking about earlier. Standardization, you go across the board and you're like, how do you do market size, and get 5 different answers? And there's really one way that you do it, the standard way that you do it. So we went around, got all the information, then created standards. So this is how it's actually done for everybody, and then power all these places so that they can help them. So it's like a combination of, trying to point out, listen, people fail for making this choice. Here's a way to think about it that allows them. They're like 8 minutes long, right? So they're micro learning, and they're meant to empower the accelerators. We don't work with the founders. We work with the startup assistance programs, and then they work with the founders. So that's our real focus, right? Is just to take away the majority of the reasons why they fail, like at least eliminate that, and leave it up to the experts to focus on the things that are outliers. That's where they should be putting their energy, and therefore they can scale better, right? Instead of, YC letting in 1.8% of the people that apply, they can let in hundreds and let them do it themselves and serve themselves, and then only allow a certain percentage of them to get the help, right? And because a lot of these folks they're missing just a couple of little things. They don't need everything. They just need a couple of little things here and there to help them out. And that's my focus. And it's comes from a place of like, you know, I mean, I was working 4 jobs, eating breakfast at hotels and waiting tables and delivering newspapers and trying to get my business off the ground for years when I started, right? I mean, just homeless for times. I mean, it was really hard. And when you make it, you know, to a point, you look back and you're like, oh my God, there's a lot of cats out there like me doing this. I want to help them. It shouldn't be, everybody shouldn't have the same path when this has been going on for like 30 years. I mean, it's just insane, you know? So that's my focus.
Great mission. And yeah, I share that. I mean, I think like there's a lot of glamour in entrepreneurship. There's a lot of hurt, and there's a lot of, you know, sadness as well, and self-doubt as well. And I think, you know, as early stage founders, like everyone's going through it, but it's like a lot of things, it kind of remains a lot in the shadows because everyone wants to present the best version of themselves. Yeah, so for me, my main mission is just to help empower entrepreneurs who don't know how to code themselves. You know, there are incredibly powerful no-code tools out there that you can learn real hard skills to teach you how to build things. First, landing pages, structuring your offers, but also like MVPs of all types, including AI, because I know that AI startups, and then actionable frameworks, like basically leading people not to this is what you should do, but how do you actually do it? And so those are kind of the 2 main things that I focus on. I focus extremely on the early stage. So basically building MVPs and getting first paying customers. Then I want founders to understand what the next steps could look like. And I embrace all steps. I just like people to go into those next steps of growth, accelerators, and all that, understanding the implications, because sometimes they're not aligned with their goals. And so, yeah, I think that it was so amazing to get all of you guys' sort of insight in the market. I think we all come from a very similar place of like wanting to give back and help and support. So thank you so much for taking your time today. And thanks for the Peach Score team for inviting me. And maybe we'll just finish off by talking about the websites. So peachscore.com, you can go check it out. I see here in the chat, gregoryshepard.com as well, if you want to follow what Greg's doing. wearenocode.com for my company. And Ali, if you could name drop yours as well, that'd be awesome.
Sure. And, just real quick, I know we're over. Christian, thank you so much for moderating the event. Amazing job as always. Ali, Gregory, thank you so much for you guys' time and all your support with our program and these webinars. I think we can probably have this, you know, continue talking for the rest of the day, if not the rest of the week.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do these more often. We'll see how it goes. Really appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had a great time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I did too. Thank you so much. And the
Thank
Payani group is Ali's Payani group and Payani Media, just the last websites.
Right.
Excellent.
Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful
Thank
rest
you.
of the week.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.